This is a lesson for 3-1, which is graphing lines using the chart method. A reminder about how to graph lines. Remember that when you have points, all right, when you have points, your first number is how many you go left or right. Your second number is how many you go up or down. So when we're taking a look at 3, 2, right, remember that we always start right in the middle when we go to graph points. We always start right where that x-axis and y-axis cross. And we want to graph these points. So 3, 2. Your first number is how many you go left or right. Your second number is how many you go up or down. So starting in the middle, over to 3, up to 2. This is where A would be. 4, -4, 1. Starting in the middle, over into -4, up to +1. This is where B would be. -2, -4. Starting in the middle, over to -2, down to -4. That's where C would be. And 5, -3. Over to 5, down to -3. So that's where D would be. Now, we're not graphing just random points today. What we're doing is we are graphing lines today. You are going to end up graphing 3 lines for each graph, and they should form a straight line. If they don't form a straight line, if they form like a V shape or an L shape or some weird slanted thing, you did it wrong. They should always form a straight line. So what you're going to do is you're going to follow these steps. You're going to choose 3 values for x. Most of the time, we're just going to choose 0, 1, and 2. Unless there is a fraction. If there's a fraction like 1/2, we want to choose multiples of the denominator. So instead of choosing 0, 1, and 2, we would choose 0, 2, and 4. If we have a fraction like 1/3, we would choose multiples of the denominator. So we would choose 0, 3, and 6. We'll get to that in a minute, though. We want to then sub your x values into the expression to find your y. Then you're going to plot your points. You're going to end up graphing 3 points. You're going to connect the points to form a line. You have to form a line, and you have to put arrows on the ends of your line, because otherwise you're not graphing a line, you're graphing a line segment. These lines technically go on forever in both directions, so we need to put arrows at the end of the line. Then you're going to want to label your line, which is just writing the equation next to the line. So let's take a look at this first one. This first one is a very typical question. So we're going to choose 0, 1, and 2 for our x. All that we're going to have in this middle part is just x minus 2. It's what our expression is. So what we're going to do is we are going to take these numbers, 0, 1, and 2, and sub them in for x. So instead of x minus 2, we're going to have 0 minus 2. Instead of x minus 2, we're going to have 1 minus 2. Instead of x minus 2, we're going to have 2 minus 2. So we're just taking these numbers and subbing them in for x. Now you're actually going to do that calculation and put your answer in your y column. 0 minus 2. 0 minus 2 is -2. 1 minus 2. 1 minus 2 is -1. 2 minus 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. Now we're ready to graph our 3 points. Remember, your x value is how many you go over. Your y value is how many you go up or down. So we always start in the middle when we go to graph our points. So our first point is 0, -2. Starting in the middle, over 0, down to -2, and put a dot. Now, unlike the last chapter, we're not putting letters with our points. All we do is put our dot, and that's it. 1, -1. Starting in the middle, over to 1, down to -1. And 2, 0. Starting in the middle, over to 2, up to 0. Now, your 3 dots, take a look at those. Those should always form a straight line. If they don't form a straight line, you did something wrong. Put arrows on the ends of your line, put arrows on the ends of your line, and we want to label our line. Now, labeling our line just means that we want to take and write down what the equation is, either at the top of the line or the bottom of the line. It doesn't matter which one. Right? I'm going to be very picky about you putting the arrows on the ends and labeling your line, because that's how they are on the state test and your Regents exam next year. So that is a graph of a line. Again, it should always be a straight line. Then you're going to have a third part, which is going to ask you a question. It says, is the point 5, 3 on the line? Now, sometimes you can figure it out just from the graph of the line. 5, 3, over to 5, up to 3. They want to know, is this point on the line? Now, you can do it one of two ways. You can do it graphically. You could just extend your line. Now, notice how we go from left to right. We're really going up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1. So if we extend our line, we're going to keep on going up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1. And we're going to extend our line. And notice that that point is on the line. This was the point that we were looking at. That point is on the line. So what you're going to put today is the word yes. It is on the line. Is the point 5, 3 on the line algebraically? Sometimes you're going to have to, the point that they're going to ask for will be off the graph. All right, so we'll have to do this algebraically. Remember that all points are written x comma y. So 5 is your x, 3 is your y. Now, what you're going to do with this point is sub it into this equation. So you're going to take it and sub it in. So instead of y equals, we're going to have 3 equals. Instead of x minus 2, we're going to have 5 minus 2. Well, just like doing a check when we're solving equations, we actually want to do this calculation now. 5 minus 2 is 3. Does 3 equal 3? Yes, it does. So our answer is yes. When you have matching numbers on each side of the equal sign, our answer is yes. If we had like 5 equals 3, then our answer would be no, and our point would not fall on the line. We'll see some of those in a second. So let's take a look at the next one. In the next one, again, we're going to pick 0, 1, and 2. We're going to sub those numbers into this expression. Now, be very careful here. When you go to sub in your numbers, we're not writing 2, 0 plus 1. That's not 20 plus 1. Remember that when a number and a letter are next to each other, that really means times. So that really means 2 times 0 plus 1. 2 times 1 plus 1. And 2 times 2 plus 1. Again, all we're doing is taking our numbers for our x and sticking them in for x. So instead of 2 times x, we have 2 times the number plus 1. You could just type these right into your calculator. 2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. And 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Again, remember, your x value is how many we go over. Your y value is how many we go up or down. So starting in the middle, remember we always start right here when we're graphing our points. 0, 1, starting in the middle, over 0, up to 1, put a dot. I don't know why that did that. Starting in the middle, 1, 3, over to 1, up to 3, over to 1, up to 3, put a dot. And 2, 5, starting in the middle, over to 2, up to 5, put a dot. Connect your dots to form a straight line. Again, remember, if it does not form a straight line, if it forms like a V shape, you did it wrong. And you should label your line. Now, this one asks, is the point -2, -1 a solution on the line? -2, -1. They want to know, is that purple point on the line? So we can go and extend our line. We can make our line longer. We were going up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1 to the right. So I could work my line backwards and continue it going backwards by going 1 to the left and 2 down, 1 to the left and 2 down. So I can extend my line going backwards like that. Is that purple point on the line? No, it is not. Now, could I have done this algebraically instead? Sure. -2 is my x and 1 is my y. Instead of y equals, I would have -1 equals. Instead of 2 times x, I would have 2 times -2 plus 1. 2 times -2 is -4, plus 1 is -3. Does -1 equal -3? No, it does not. Notice that our point was not on the line. So this is what it will look like when it does not check, when your answer is no. You'll end up with different numbers on each side of the equal sign. Let's take a look at this one. Now, this one has a fraction in it. Remember, to change a fraction into a decimal, you have to do the top number divided by the bottom number. In this one, we're going to choose 0, 2, and 4 instead, because we want to choose multiples of the denominator. So we're going to have 0.5 times x plus 1. So again, we're going to take our 0, 2, and 4 and sub them in for x. So instead of 0.5 times x, I have 0.5 times 0. Instead of 0.5 times x, I have 0.5 times 2. Instead of 0.5 times x, I have 0.5 times 4. Don't forget about the plus 1s at the end of our equation. So now you can just type those right into the calculator. 0.5 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. 0.5 times 2 is 1, plus 1 is 2. 0.5 times 4 is 2, plus 1 is 3. Remember, our x value is how many go over. Our y value is how many go up or down. Remember, again, we are starting right in the middle at that green dot. So when we go to graph it, starting in the middle, over 0, up to 1, put it on. 2, 2. Starting in the middle, over to 2, up to 2. 4, 3. Starting in the middle, over to 4, up to 3. Again, your 3 dots should form a straight line. These do. Put your arrows on the ends and label your line. Does the solution 8, 5 lay on the line? Now, 8 would be all the way over into here. So we can't tell this one graphically. We can't tell it by looking at the graph. You have to take and sub in your x and your y for the 8 and the 5. So instead of y equals, we have 5 equals. Instead of 0.5 times x, we have 0.5 times 8 plus 1. You could type that right into the calculator. 0.5 times 8 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So we end up with 5 equals 5. Anytime that we end up with the same thing on both sides, your answer is yes. So let's take a look at one that has a negative number. Again, we're going to choose 0, 1, and 2. And we're going to take those numbers and sub them in for x. So instead of -3 times x, I have -3 times 0. Instead of -3 times x, I have -3 times 1. And instead of -3 times x, I have -3 times 2. Don't forget your plus 2's at the end of our equation. So now take those 3 things, type them into the calculator, and get your y values. -3 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. -3 times 1 is -3, plus 2 is -1. And -3 times 2 is -6, plus 2 is -4. Your x value is how many go over. Your y value is how many go up or down. 0, 2, starting in the middle, over to 0, up to 2, or dot. 1, -1, over to 1, down to -1, put a dot. And 2, -4, over to 2, down to -4. Here's our straight line. Again, it should always form a straight line. If it does not form a straight line, you did it wrong. And we always need to label our line. Put your arrows at the end. Is 5, -10 a solution? Well, we can go over to 5, but down to -10, that's going to be down here somewhere. We can't tell just by looking at the graph. So we need to do this algebraically. Instead of y equals, I would have -10 equals. Instead of -3 times x, I would have -3 times 5 plus 2. -3 times 5 is -15, plus 2 is -13. Are those equal to each other? No, they are not. So the point is not on the line. All right, take a look at this one. Again, we want to choose 0, 1, and 2. We want to sub those into 3x minus 2. So taking our 0, 1, and 2 and subbing it in for x. Instead of 3 times x, I would have 3 times 0. Instead of 3 times x, I would have 3 times 1. And instead of 3 times x, I would have 3 times 2. Don't forget about your minus 2 at the end. You could type those right into the calculator. 3 times 0 is 0, minus 2 is -2. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 2 is 1. 3 times 2 is 6, minus 2 is 4. This is how many you go over. This is how many you go up or down. So 0, -2, starting in the middle, over 0, down to -2. 1, 1, starting in the middle, over to 1, up to 1, and 2, 4, starting in the middle, over to 2, up to 4. They should always form a straight line. If they don't, you did something wrong. Those do. And put your arrows on the end and label it. 826. Obviously, 826 is not going to fit on our line. So we need to take our x value and take our y value and sub them in. So instead of y equals, we have 26 equals. Instead of 3 times x, we have 3 times 8 minus 2. 3 times 8 is 24, minus 2 is 22. Does 26 equal 22? No, it does not. One more, one last one. Let's choose 0, 1, and 2 again. Those numbers will be chosen for you in Class Kick. Subbing those numbers into our equation for x. Instead of -2 times x, I have -2 times 0, -2 times 1, -2 times 2. Don't forget about your plus 1 at the end. -2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. -2 times 1 is -2, plus 1 is -1. -2 times 2 is -4, plus 1 is -3. So 0, 1 over 0 up to 1. 1, -1 over to 1 down to -1. And 2, 3 to -3 over to 2 down to -3. Again, those should form a straight line. If they don't, you did something wrong. Put your arrows on the ends and label it. Is 5, -11 a solution? So instead of y equals, I have -11 equals. Instead of -2 times x, I have -2 times 5 plus 1. -2 times 5 is -10, plus 1 is -9. Does -11 equal -9? No, it does not. Make sure that your 3 dots form a straight line. If they don't, you did something wrong.